please.
Mhm. Welcome to our virtual meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Ariana. Aiden, why don't you call a roll? And it's possible that some folks might be late because of updates, because I know it took me a while to get in after I did my update. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
thanks. Yeah, I ended up getting caught in one too.
Yeah.
So Juliana Bennett, who I don't see at the moment.
Yeah, I see her here.
Here.
She showed.
Oh, thank you. MGR Govindarajan, who I don't see. Dina Nina Martinez Rutherford.
She messaged that she would be late, Aiden.
Okay. Lady. Barbara Harrington McKinney. Ann Kovich.
Here.
Robbie Weber.
Here.
Pepe Barros.
Here.
Chris McCahill.
Here.
Bill Bremer.
Here.
Harold Kleems.
If he didn't send a message, he's in Germany at the moment, I believe.
I didn't get a message from him. Usually he lets us know when he's going to be traveling. So he's excused. He let you know, Robbie, he wouldn't be here.
Yeah, we didn't overlap. I think he left the day before I came back. So
Okay. All right. Thanks for letting us know. We'll show him as excused.
Lynn Olson.
Here.
And then Denise Jess and Kaylee Jameson are excused as well.
Okay. Thanks. And Lynn, with the absences tonight, you're as an alternate, you're moved into a voting member status, so you can make motions and vote tonight. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting? Chris.
All the minutes.
Okay, there's a motion. Bill?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote in favor, unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is carried. Aiden, do we have anybody registered under item 1, public comment for items not on tonight's agenda?
We do not know.
Okay. Any disclosures or recusals this evening? Okay, seeing no hands. Move on to the consent agenda. We have just one item, item 2 on the consent agenda this evening. Do we have anybody registered to speak on item 2, Aiden?
We do not, no.
Okay. Does anybody wish to have that excluded from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing no hands, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Bill?
Make a motion for acceptance of the consent agenda.
Okay, there's a motion. Robbie?
second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands, that motion is carried unanimously. Okay, we move on to item 3, update of our Complete Green Streets Guide. And I'll turn it over to Renee and say, Renee, just really excellent job on updating and incorporating all of the things that we've been talking about. And we'll turn it over to you to report back to us.
Okay, thanks. And I'll just share this quickly. Okay.
I'm sorry, Renee. Aiden, do we have anybody registered to speak on this?
We do. We have one registrant.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll go ahead with Renee's presentation, then we'll hear from the public, and then we'll have discussion and questions. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Anne. So just reiterate, I'm Renee Calloway. I'm the Assistant Director of Traffic Engineering, and I have been managing the Complete Green Streets Guide project and the staff team that we have. And so we are coming back now after having some fall kind of working sessions to kind of review things in the guide. The original approving resolution said that we would come back after 18 months so that we would have a chance to do some projects, and then we would have our first review. So we came back, we did 2 sessions here. We did a session with the Board of Public Works, and now we're coming back to approve some changes. So I will just jump in here. It's a little review. We did do a lot of staff training, but really in that first 18 months, we did 5 reconstruction projects, and now we're just kind of starting with this year's projects. So, there aren't a lot that are under the belt yet. There have, of course, been some development projects as well, which have been a learning experience. As you can see, we didn't get our subdivision ordinance updated actually until late July. We did have one project that came for variance. We had other projects that have just followed the guide without requests for variance. We've done 2 area plans now because also the resolution has the area plans are one of the places where street types might be changed based on the feedback and information of kind of what you want a street to look like in the future. So there were a few changes that were recommended in both the Northeast and West area plan, as well as one change to our draft all ages and ability bike network routing. And then, as I mentioned, in September, we had 2 meetings with the Transportation Commission and one of the Board of Public Works to kind of talk through, workshop some of the ideas that had come up over the course of the implementation. So this is just highlighting the resolution and the things that the Transportation Commission kind of do, and that is, make changes related to a large part of it. Although you can see the Board of Public Works is actually the one that updates things related to the tree, canopy priority, and green infrastructure priority areas. But you oversee updating the transit priority network, the all ages and ability bike network, and a lot of the street design features. So I'm just going to run through quickly some of the changes, but I will go into them a little bit more depth. Some changes to our equity priority areas. A slight change recommended to the All Ages and Abilities Bikeway Selection Guide, switching up some of how we talk about the street zone names, and a new section that came out of some discussions that we've had over how people can meet the fire code when they have taller buildings. A few clarifications in design tables. Just to clarify what some things need or how they might work. And then just some document cleanup overall to reflect some of the things that have been done, like the ordinance change, remove the Transportation Policy and Planning Board references now that all of that is under the Transportation Commission, and then just update what the maps look like based on the area plans that were approved. So first, also, I want to mention last Wednesday, I went to the Board of Public Works so that they could consider some recommended changes, and they did approve the ones that are listed here, which you had seen for those of you who've been on the commission for since September. It's kind of the things that we had talked about then, which was a new section with a table talking about tree canopy enhancement and some things that we have been doing, but just clarifying those more that we can do, not just to plant new trees, but to help enhance the overall health of our tree canopy. So that was approved. And also they added just one sentence that we had discussed in the street type, to have a street type that talks a little bit more about being having trees, which is the boulevard street type. So they just added that one sentence in. One new footnote about flex zones. This is something that staff have been doing, which is requiring an 8-foot minimum terrace in a new street or a new dedication for a street. And staff just felt like, although they've been doing that, they would like to have that reflected in the guide in case there was any pushback in the future. And that's really important for future tree canopy to have that minimum terrace size. And then they just updated what the distributed green infrastructure flow chart looks like. They didn't actually change how it works, but we had one that just looks a little bit nicer that will be inserted into the guide. So that was kind of just a cleanup item. So one thing we have been talking about for a while is expanding our equity priority areas, which get kind of an extra process and a little bit more just ensuring that we're having the same street design that we would have in a neighborhood across the city. So since we passed the guide, there have been 2 new neighborhood resource team areas created. And so I would like to recommend adding those into the guide. One is kind of in the East Milwaukee Street area, as you can see, sort of south and east of the interstates. So that is a new one. And then in the Sandburg area, kind of east of Portage Road, north of East Washington, near the Sandburg Woods Park. I don't have the exact maps for you because the neighborhood resource team is working on updating their map, but that's basically where they are. Now, we had talked in September about a larger city project that's going on to come up with some official priority areas. And at this point, we're kind of recommending waiting potentially until 2026. We have another project going on to kind of build out more of a toolkit for staff for working in equity priority areas. And since the city hasn't officially released the other maps that we had looked at, they're still kind of in a draft form. We thought it might be best to wait and incorporate that work all at one time and just add the neighborhood resource teams right now. We updated the map that's in the guide just to reflect that the changes that were made with the West Area Plan. We have started a project now to finalize this map. So this is something that will be a bigger final map coming in the future. But for now, I just updated based on what was already approved at council. One thing that we noted as staff was that our kind of selection of bike facilities, we thought it would be useful to add buffered, if possible, to the bike lane, since that does tend to be our preferred option when space is available. So that was a suggestion that came out of our work as well. Also on street types, just updated those maps based on the West Area Plan and Northeast Area Plan. They did make some changes and you can see those highlighted in yellow. And I just felt like for now the guide should have the latest ones in there to kind of show that that is changing over time. Another thing that we talked about, and this came out of the walkway, is initially we were talking about changing that to walk zone to be a little bit more clear, since most of our street types, people are kind of confused because we show a walk zone, say on a neighborhood street, at being at 6 feet. But that's because it's 5 feet for the sidewalk and a 1 foot buffer that we like to generally have off the property line when possible. So in our fall meetings, the suggestion was made to call that the walk zone, and then to just call them all zones. So instead of just calling it the travel way, to call it the travel way zone. I realized after we did that, we probably could just call it the travel zone, but you'll see that in this, I left it all at travel way zone. So that, and then flex zone, that's always what it's been called. So then we just had some things related to kind of cleanup of the details. Engineers were asking just how to, more precisely how things would be measured. So you can see that for the travel way zone width, that's edge of pavement to edge of pavement. And then another kind of cleanup item is a lot of times 8 feet is on a kind of busier street, how much space we would consider parking to take up. But on a neighborhood street or neighborhood yield street, we've always been comfortable with it actually being 7 foot, with 2 foot being the gutter, or 1 foot, depending on the size of the gutter. So we wanted to list that in there because it is another way that you can use that flex zone for other purposes, such as a butter terrace. And then just one of the cleanups was we had the average daily traffic, the ADT, in both of the tables, and we just felt it was cleaner to just have it in table 6.2 instead of also in 6.1. And here you can kind of see in red a couple of those changes. It's kind of hard to see the red on the orange, but just making some minor changes, as I mentioned. 6.2, we keep the average daily traffic, the ADT, but staff felt like calling it estimated instead of typical was just a little bit more flexible in how you might think about a street. So that change was made. Added a footnote on neighborhood yield streets. We have come across some kind of situations that we didn't think a lot about. First being, it's kind of popular to build streets that have very few or even no driveways. All of the driveways are off an alley. And kind of a yield street does work well because there's a driveway where you can pull over, yield to another car. So we just wanted some language about kind of creating some pullover zones on the street through some no parking areas to kind of fit the needs of the particular street. So that's a new footnote. Fire was comfortable with that as well. But if we have a street with no driveways, there is no actual yield-in location, like our typical older neighborhood streets. And then we also have a situation where we are trying to build a neighborhood yield street, but they have no or very low parking utilization, but we don't necessarily want to remove all the parking. So what we wanted to include is just that in those situations that there would need to be design elements that reinforce that. Now that could be bump outs, that could be a variety of things, but we would need to create that yielding condition in those situations. We have one new footnote related to transit. It's for the just a couple of the street types, and that is just clarifying for people a little bit more how much space a transit bus actually needs as we try to narrow up the street. Obviously, on transit routes, we still want to make sure that it works for the buses and that it can operate successfully as a transit route. And then just a couple more in 6.2, clarifying how we would measure things. It's kind of a little detail, but this is something, this guide is very important to staff, and so these little details really matter to them. So just clarifying a couple more of those. And here's that chart with the additions in it. And then, so this is a new section, and I know that this has, you may remember, for those of you who've been on here longer, our first project came through development. They were looking at building a neighborhood street, but they had taller buildings. And so they came and just asked for a variance. And so we have been here, we came to talk about this, and then we talked about it again in September, is what are some ways that they can meet the guide requirements of keeping streets narrower. And I think the one confusion about this, and maybe we need to change the title of this section a little bit, is this really is about neighborhood streets and mixed use neighborhood streets, the ones that typically are lower volume. So they typically have a shared space for motor vehicles and bicycles. And how can you meet the fire requirements for the larger apparatus while still keeping the narrow travel way that we have in the guide? So that was definitely a little bit of a conflict. So Chris Petakowski came up with a variety, along with the staff team, a variety of kind of creative ways that you could keep a narrow street and still meet the fire requirements for those situations where it needs to be in the public right of way, where they don't have the construction methods, or maybe there isn't the ability to kind of meet the goals of the development on the property for the fire lane. So this is some of the pictures. And what I'm thinking is, although this is called Complete and Green Streets in Alignment with Fire Code, we may want to change the name of this to clarify that this is really about two of the street types, the neighborhood street and the mixed-use neighborhood street, where we're trying to have someone who lives in a larger, taller development have the same benefits of a narrow neighborhood street that a single-family residence neighborhood can. So these were the options that we had come up with and had brought to you for discussion, and we would like to incorporate this into the guide. The one change that I want to talk about today is something that came up as the staff talked about this a little bit more, which is on option 5. We had showed kind of a typical 6-foot walkway zone, but we realized that on that one, if a car is backing in, that we would want to have a wider space because that bumper is going to take up some of the walk zone space. So that is the one change that we said we would want a little bit of a wider sidewalk in that situation. All right, and then we did some cleanup, removing, like I said, the Transportation and Policy and Planning Board, removing the reference to needing to update the subdivision ordinance. I changed some of the guides, just the pictures, because they have updated versions. I tried to reflect kind of where ProAg stands right now, but Bill can maybe comment on if that needs to be changed at all. Some spelling mistakes, some wording updates that weren't caught in the first version. And then Anne caught something that was, and this is a new slide from what you got. In the implementation section on item 4, there's still a mention of forwarding things to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board. And Anne came up with a few suggestions, and I decided that I think it would be best just to completely eliminate it. It doesn't kind of need to stay in that section as a kind of historical item. And then I noticed that we had talked about making a switch to the Parkway speed limit. It was originally listed as 25 to 35. We discussed changing it to 25 to 30, which I did change, but only in one of 2 spots. So I wanted to make sure that we clarified if we wanted to make that change this evening or leave it as it was. A little bit on next steps. So based on what gets approved tonight, we would make those changes. There'd be some graphics that still need cleaned up. Add some median trees like to the boulevard because that graphic doesn't have any. Clean up the ones in the fire code alignment to make them a little crisper and nicer, and get that posted on our website. And we would share kind of what has changed with all the staff who use the guide as well, so that they are aware. And then, I mean, I think the beauty of this guide is that it's kind of a continuous improvement and refinement situation. We have a staff team. There is going to be a new planner within the Department of Transportation, hopefully hired soon, who's going to take on leading the guide and overseeing our staff team, which has people from transportation, traffic engineering, planning, fire, and forestry involved, as well as, you know, Metro and others as needed to ensure that we're meeting everyone's kind of needs. So that will happen. And then you guys and the Board of Public Works would get updates. You guys would get area plan updates. Later this year or early next year, we would be coming back to approve a finalized all ages and ability bike network. We would be coming back in 2026 with the work that I mentioned on equity priority areas and improving kind of our toolkit and how the engagement process in those areas works. And then other identified items, there was something around trees that came up at Board of Public Works. There was a suggestion to kind of make a chart of how some of the different plans work together. We'll be working on overhauling our website. So there'll be a number of things going on as well, just because that is the nature of having a guide that we don't want to get stale. So this kind of lists out what those recommended changes are, all in one place, but I'm going to stop sharing for now because I know we have public comment, and then I can reshare this for the discussion.
Okay, thanks, Renee. Aiden, who do we have tonight as registered?
So we have Nicholas Davies of Richard Street, neither supports nor opposes, and wishes to speak.
Okay, welcome, Nick. Go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you. I emailed you all with some feedback about the current draft of section 6.5, the section intended to answer the question of how we can balance traffic calming and the minimum width requirement. None of the designs shown in the section today include dedicated bike facilities under the reasoning that low volume streets don't necessarily need them, but I'd encourage you to reconsider that for these reasons. First, dedicating part of the street width to a bike facility can be a powerful technique to meet that minimum width requirement while discouraging reckless driving. For example, instead of two 13-foot travel lanes, you could have two narrow travel lanes and a separated bidirectional bike facility. If these are separated with just a low curb, that bike facility could count towards the minimum width. I included a couple examples of how this has been done successfully in Paris, for example. Because adding a bike facility can actually help us meet both these competing priorities at once, the minimum width and the traffic calming, a bike facility could be an element worth including even if it wouldn't otherwise be necessary. Secondly, usage and volumes can change over time. So when I see a design with two 13-foot travel lanes, I worry that in future that could become a high-speed or high-volume road, and then it could become very challenging to use and to cross as a non-motorist. That shared space could become effectively non-shared. And lastly, it's also an issue of representation. If we're talking about low-volume streets, then the type of usage we would expect to see on those streets at any snapshot in time is no one. So times when there are cars passing each other in opposite directions would be vanishingly rare. So if any of the cars in these diagrams could just as well be bicycles, then why not make them? Why not reflect that in the guide? So I'm advocating for including options that include bike facilities, not that all of the options necessarily need to, but I think these options could use another iteration. There are currently 5 options shown. But for example, option 5 is just a variant of option 1 with some tree canopy swapped out for some marginal additional car storage. And I think that's just kind of a downgraded version of option 1 in my view. So I look forward to future revisions of this section and of the guide in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Does anybody have a question for the registrant? Okay, thanks very much for coming and sharing your thoughts. Comments or questions for Renee? Very, very thorough job, Renee. You've done a good job of coming back to us with ideas and talking through the various important sections, and we appreciate that. So any comments or questions on the recommendations that Renee brought forward? Robbie, go ahead.
Hi. So this, I think, is just a clarification. There was one update where you talked about how the width of the road would be measured by pavement, and I'm assuming that means not including the gutter pan. And is that right?
Yeah, so sometimes it would be, from just the pavement, and sometimes we wanted to clarify if it's like the face of curb or that. We just
Well-
wanted to clarify that space a little bit more.
Right, because then in the parking area, when you talk about the needed width, you talk about 7 feet and include the gutter pan, which might be 1 foot or it could be 2 feet. So I just wanted to clarify that I didn't misunderstand how those two measures were being used.
Yes. So I think it's an area of right, like where you get down to the foot or 2 foot. So we wanted to clarify because it also can be, back of curb to back of curb, face of curb to face of curb. So staff were asking for like which is it, and then also on the pavement, right, like it's pavement, edge of pavement to center of the markings if there are any. So it's kind of little details, but I think it helps people with the design process, staff with the design process.
Okay, but if we have, say, I didn't have a example ready because I'm thinking if we had, say, a 26-foot street and we had 7 feet of parking, that's actually 28 feet because if you're including the gutter pans, it's 28 feet instead of 26 feet. Right?
Yeah, and I think the part where it gets kind of like the travel way is one measurement and then the parking is in the flex zone, but we still have this curb to curb that we're trying not to go over, which is face a curb to face a curb, even though the travel way is generally thinking about the pavement.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking that if we're looking at how a particular street looks and feels to all users, a 26-foot travel way plus a foot of gutter pan definitely feels different than if you're measuring, you know what I mean? It's actually a 26-foot street.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether that's going to cause problems for us with, including that additional space, especially if we end up with a 2-foot gutter pan instead of a 1-foot gutter pan.
Yeah.
But I'm just thinking about the feel of the street.
Yeah. And I think, obviously on streets that don't have parking, right? Like that is a different feel because that gutter is just a part of what feels like the full travel way.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Robbie. Other comments or questions?
I just want to add one more question. When you
Sure.
have travel way, does that include any marked or unmarked bike facilities?
Yeah, so the travel way is generally going to be where the bike facility is, except if it is a shared use path, then that goes into the walkway zone, like on a parkway or a boulevard. But on a
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, these details are important, Renee, because if it meets the guide, they don't have to come to the Transportation Commission. So it's very important for design staff to understand what meets the guide and what doesn't meet the guide. Other comments or questions for Renee? I think it was a very thorough job, and I think the beauty of this is that it's a process. And as new things are discovered, staff can come back to the Transportation Commission and we can look at making additional changes. That's, so it's not something that is, set in stone tonight. It's just a continuing process to make sure the guide is up to date. So Renee has recommended a number of changes, and we would need a motion to approve the updated complete Green Streets Guide with the changes recommended by staff. Would there be a motion? Robbie?
Move approval of the staff recommended changes.
Okay, there's a motion. Alder Martinez Rutherford.
I second it.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Robbie, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands. I'm going to assume a unanimous vote unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, the motion is carried. Thanks so much, Renee. Really, really great work. This guide has been took a long time to get put in place, and it's really been a fantastic addition to the city, and so helpful to us and to staff, I imagine, and to the public in terms of understanding.
Yeah, and I'm just going to take 2 minutes, maybe 1 minute.
Sure.
To thank everyone.
Take as much time as you want, Renee.
I think this is one of the most exciting projects because it is a living document that will change and grow and learn as we go along, and it doesn't just sit on a shelf. It's being implemented, and we're learning, and we have a staff team, and we have a Transportation Commission and the Board of Public Works who are very, I think, passionate about improving it and utilizing it. So I just want to say thanks to everyone who's been a part of it. And even though I won't be the one overseeing it going forward, I look forward to hearing and seeing how it grows and develops and enjoying the projects in Madison that come out of it. So thanks for your hard work and for the hard work that you'll do in the future. So thank you.
Thanks to you, Renee. You're a huge reason why this is so successful. So other comments or questions? Okay, great. Thanks so much. Let's move on then to item 4, the West Washington Avenue at Southwest Commuter Path, update and approval. Tom.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Tom Moore, Assistant Traffic Engineer. So you might remember we were here about a month ago to talk about this intersection. So I'm not going to go through everything we discussed, but basically we've got the emergency lane closure in place, and then combined with, or secondarily with that, we have the OCR order to remove the RRFB here. So let's see. So at the last meeting, we were kind of discussing the possibility of either signalizing or using a pedestrian hybrid beacon. One thing that was clear from the last meeting is we wanted to rule out the pedestrian hybrid beacon. But then there was also the question of, could we just remove the RRFB and not signalize? And since that meeting, I talked with OCR staff, and they clarified that that is not an option with this order. The city always has the option to ask for an amended order, but basically with the discussion that we had, it sounds like that would be very unlikely to go anywhere, and would most likely just delay the process because of what's in the existing order, the reasoning, and then the language of requiring a traffic control device that's capable of being interconnected with the railroad warning system. So if that or what that means is the full traffic signal is the option that really the only option we have. So then the remaining question is, do we go with a 4-lane, which is the current curb geometry, or do we go down to 2 lanes permanently, which is kind of we're down to 2 lanes right now with the emergency lane closure, but that's just kind of a temporary condition. So if we were to go with the 4 lanes, we could move forward with filing the plan with the OCR to signalize under the 4-lane condition. But we would be able to keep the temporary lane closure in place and monitor it. If we wanted to go to 2 lanes permanently right away, we would have to file a separate petition with the OCR to alter the railroad crossing. And that takes some time based off of our previous experience and discussions with OCR. Their typical timeline for that is 6 months to hear that out. It's possible that if we made a really good argument, that they could kind of expedite that process. But basically, the schedule, we would be on their schedule, and it could be quite a while before we know exactly where that would go. So the other thing that we discussed at the previous meeting was that TE staff would go back and model this out. We were kind of leery about going down to 2 lanes permanently with the John Nolan Drive reconstruction and the likely traffic diversion from John Nolan Drive to West Washington Avenue. So that's what we did. The top table here shows traffic volumes from last summer. So this is what we think a typical timing at the intersection would be, and the level of service and the delay. So if we have 4 lanes, that opens up quite a bit of flexibility with the signal timing. We would probably time it kind of an even split. So 30 seconds West Wash, 30 seconds on the path. The overall intersection delay is 13.2 seconds and a level of service of B, which is really good. Going down to 2 lanes, it's still not much different. There's a little bit more overall delay. The level of service is a little bit worse, but a level of service of C, and this is just during the afternoon peak, a level of service of C is pretty good for the afternoon, the busiest time of the intersection. And now this bottom table is if we add in that diverted traffic that we're expecting to see from John Nolan Drive. So with the 4-lane, it's still similar. We could still have an even split for the green time, and we still have a good level of service. With the 2-lane, it starts to get busier, and what we would end up doing is just continuing to increase the green time on West Washington Avenue to make it operate acceptably. Basically to keep West Washington Avenue from the queue backing up into the adjacent intersections. So it's mostly from keeping inbound from backing up into the Regent Street intersection, and at times keeping outbound or westbound from backing up into Bedford. But this is quite a bit more delay. So we would kind of keep that path time set at the 30 seconds to allow, adequate time for pedestrians to cross. And then we would, based on how West Washington Avenue is operating, we would adjust this green time. We wouldn't coordinate. We don't need to coordinate the new path signal with adjacent signals. It would operate freely. But that's kind of the flexibility that signalizing it gives us, is that we can just keep adjusting that green time and bumping it up to account for the additional traffic. So now I'm going to attempt to show this to you in sim traffic. So this is the 4-lane configuration, and this is with the additional traffic from John Nolan Drive. This is normal speed. You can see inbound is pretty much full. It backs up kind of to the Regent Street intersection. And this is kind of with the even split here, even green time between West Wash and the path. We would operate this as a single stage for the path. And I can speed this up. So there's not a lot to comment on here. It operates pretty good, pretty acceptable. I mean, this is still, the volumes here are still, I think, below what they were pre-COVID. So we kind of know what this looks like. Oh, and one other thing that I want to mention is that we did look at the video from last summer of the kind of how this operates without the signal right now. And right now, without the signal during the afternoon, it's kind of an even split. So it's roughly West Washington Avenue traffic will go for about 10-ish seconds, and then they'll have to stop for about 10 seconds. And that just continues forward. And that was just based off of the path volume now and how that operates, and that's with basically zero delay on the path. As users get up, they hit the button, they go straight through. So that's the 4-lane condition, and now I will show you the 2-lane. So this is the 2-lane condition with our signal timing in. So this is with a 50 seconds on West Washington Avenue and 30 seconds on the path. This is showing vehicles on the path, and that's just for the model. Obviously, we're not going to have cars driving on the path, but there is more of a backup. This is kind of closer to what it looked like last summer with no signal. And again, if we get more traffic, we can just increase the green time on West Wash. What ends up happening is that inbound will back up from the stop bar here. So yeah, that's that. If I go back to presentation. Oops, I'm sorry, this is the wrong one. So looking at the pros and cons of each, with the 4 lanes, there's going to be less delay for the path users since they won't have to wait for that long green time on West Washington Avenue, but that's kind of just during the peak hour, during the busy times of West Washington Avenue when we need to add that green time. We wouldn't have the curb changes, and that would require storm sewer changes, kind of a bigger construction project. The cons are it's a longer path crossing. We need to provide more time for pedestrians to make that longer route across all 4 lanes. And there's still some of that safety factor that we mentioned, that we talked about in detail in the last meeting with the dual threat. Although, if everyone is following the traffic signals, that shouldn't happen, but we know that doesn't always happen. With the 2 lanes, maximizes safety. which I just mentioned, a shorter path crossing so we can reduce that green time required for the path by a little bit, not a lot. Just an overall reduction of crashes. The cons are extra delay for the path and for the street, just because there's less capacity. There's always going to be the random times when there's a crash or something going on, a big event that may, we would have less flexibility to deal with something like that could back up traffic into the adjacent intersections. And then if we go for this as a permanent, we do have to go through the separate OCR approval for that. And of course, it would be more expensive to do the curb work and all the work involved in that permanent change. So to summarize this with our recommendation, we recommend signalizing to comply with the order and better protect the path users, especially those with mobility needs. So it does help them out quite a bit to provide that versus the current situation with the RFB there, but it's kind of flashing all the time, and the issues that we went through in the last meeting with piggybacking on the flashing signal and people not obeying drivers not obeying the flash. We recommend installing a detection system to trigger the traffic signal automatically for bicyclists. So this is something that we talked about the last meeting, that there's a very low compliance with bicyclists pushing the RFB button. So with the signal, we can provide advanced detection on the path, likely loops in the pavement that the bikes would trigger the signal as they approach. So they shouldn't have to push the button, shouldn't have to wait until they get right up to the path. They can trigger it as they're coming into the path, into the intersection. We can install accessible traffic signals. We recommend permanently reducing to 2 lanes. The model shows that will work. However, we recommend maintaining the current lane reduction test while we work with OCR and the railroad to secure the funding for the permanent geometric change. And then that would allow us, if we do see operational issues with the 2-lane during John Nolan Drive, that we could open it up to 4 lanes with a signal during John Nolan Drive, which would be starting this fall and continuing basically to 2030. So it's not just this first phase of John Nolan, it's the next 2 phases, which is pretty much continual construction from now, or from this fall to 2030. So that is the end of the presentation. So I can take questions or.
Thanks, Tom. Do we have anybody registered to speak on this item, Aiden?
We do. We have Dan Penzinger of Forsythia Place supports and wishes to speak.
Okay. Is he there? I don't see him.
Yeah, I don't believe I see them either.
Ariana, you don't see him either?
I do not.
Okay. Well, why don't we go ahead with questions, and Ariana, can you let us know if he pops in?
Yes, can do.
Okay, thanks. Bill, go ahead.
Thank you, Ann. Tom, I agree with all of your recommendations on how you're going to proceed. You'd like to proceed. I think that holding off on going down to 2 until the reconstruction is completed on John Nolan makes sense. And I think by, if it's till 2030, I think by then we'll know traffic, how that, adjust to that crossing. When you looked at, because we're going to signalize the bike path now, and this will be a simultaneous preemption, I assume, for the train. How many trains a day? Is that like 3 or 4 trains a day?
I think it was 1 per day, and there might have been an additional 1 full train that goes through, and then there might have been an additional smaller.
Which that goes
Thing.
out Middleton.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think. So did you try to simulate that at all? The only thing, when you signalize it, the only thing that because then when the train passes, then it goes back into normal operation, and I suspect the way it operates now without the signal is that West Washington clears before then forces the bicyclists to perhaps wait for the traffic to clear. Is that probably the case?
To be honest, I never saw a train in the video, and we've never heard a complaint about it. And since we've been down to, it's just, I think it's so infrequent and short that it's just not much of an issue.
I think with that happening, even, it's 1 or 2 trains a day, that because you were going to have that preemption in there, it's going to, so when it goes out of preemption after the train passes, then it'll go back into normal operation, so that if a bicyclists are coming along there, they will cause the delay a little bit longer on West Washington. Well, and I just wonder if the traffic backs up to what street is that? To the west, Washington
And Regent?
Regent, Regent. It backs up, and if there's any, because we don't want traffic to be plugging that intersection. But I don't foresee that as a problem with or without the traffic signals. So I think it's going to work fine. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Pepe, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Tom, I don't really have any questions, I think. I just want to comment that I think we're going in the right direction. I just want to honor the work that staff put and the thought that they put and you put into this recommendation. I think is a step towards the bravery. I think it's a brave recommendation. It's definitely not the easiest one. It's not the low-hanging fruit path. But I feel like it's the right path if we are to think long-term and put the safety of our residents first. So yeah, I just want to say thanks, and I think that very well put, and appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Pepe. I want to echo that as well. I'll save my comments till after Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
All right, thanks. So I think, Tom, the way that you have this laid out in the slide you're showing now makes a lot of sense to me. I guess I just wanted to clarify a few of the sort of sequencing things and timing stuff. The way it's laid out here, the signalization would have to wait until the road reconstruction. Is that correct? And I guess a follow-up question to that would be, well, maybe you could just answer that part first.
Yeah, sorry. I could have been more clear on that. We would move forward with the signal under the current geometry. We think we can design the signals, permanently design the signals so that it can work in either condition, basically. So we could move forward the signals now and then move forward with the curb changes later.
Okay, I think that answers everything else I was wondering. I think I was just trying to make sense of.
Chris. Yeah, I just want to add that The intent is that while we are waiting after the traffic signal is done, we're waiting for the curb to be changed. We'll keep the lane reduction in place as long as feasible by doing temporary closures like today. So, and we're very lucky this winter that we're actually able to, almost did that all the way through the winter. So hopefully, we won't get a big snowstorm. We'll have to take them out, but that's the intent. So basically, we operate like one direction, unless during construction, Jonathan Drive, cause serious issues, we might consider opening it up. But other than that, it shall operate as one each direction.
Great.
Yeah,
Then I
thank
think
you
that
for the
does answer.
question.
Yeah, thanks. I think that does answer all my sort of sequencing questions. Then it sounds like a sort of win-win situation. I guess a small question: the time, how long would the commuter path green light be? I'm guessing it would be based on the time it takes someone to walk across.
Right. Let's see here. So 30 seconds under the current condition. Once we go down to 2 lanes permanently, that can be reduced. If we would probably reduce that during the peak times. And Jerry Shippa and Dave Hansen in our office were kind of really getting into the weeds of this and looking at the different timings and what we can do with detection. But we're thinking that we would close the outside lanes to reduce that crossing, where right now we have the inside lanes closed, and that was to maintain the bus stops. We discussed with Metro, and Metro would like to relocate those bus stops, which would make it simpler for us to, when we permanently make the change, close the outside lanes to reduce the overall crossing. And then we would keep it as a single stage crossing. We were looking at multi-stage versus single stage. Single stage probably simpler, easier, better compliance with the path users. And then one other thing about the signal timing, during the really low overnight times when it's really low usage, we would likely rest on red for both directions. And that way, when you have a random bike coming, they should almost not have to stop. They just go right through, it detects them, they get the green, they go through. So there's different things we can do with the signal timing to make it better for bikes than what it is now. Because right now it's just the push button for the RFB or nothing.
Yeah, great. Thanks. It sounds like there's a lot to play with. So this is, great. I guess that was all my questions. Just one sort of reflection is on the concerns about traffic and the simulation. It's great to have a simulation to sort of visualize what might happen. I think it's worth, though, just reminding everybody that it's based on a bunch of assumptions that we can't predict the future. So, things could be worse at times, especially when there's events. Things will be much better most of the time. So the best we can do is design for the outcomes we want. So I think this is like a great strategy. Thanks.
Yep, exactly. With the modeling, right. It is based on a lot of assumptions. The good thing is that what we put in shows that it works. When we were at the previous meeting, we hadn't done any. It was just kind of our guess of what this would look like permanently down to 2 lanes. But this is showing, makes me a lot more comfortable with this, just doing the modeling.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I also support your recommendation and just want to commend you for the excellent work. I know it's been a lot of work. A very thoughtful plan, although it does require additional OCR approval, but it definitely appears to comply with the OCR order and address the safety and other concerns that were expressed both by the public and by the Transportation Commission. So I know there was a lot of balancing that went into this, and I really commend you on this solution. So, other comments or questions? Okay, we would need a motion to approve staff's recommendations. Bill?
Thanks, Dan. I'll make a motion for adoption of all of the recommendations that presented this evening by the staff on their.
Okay. Okay, there's a motion for adoption of all of staff's recommendations. Chris?
Second.
Bill, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yeah, I think this is a good solution. I think this is what we heard a lot of interest by path users, that this will improve their ability to get across the street safer, especially by when we can reduce it to two or keep it at 2 lanes in each direction. And I agree with Tom. I hadn't thought about which lanes we close, but I agree with closing the outside eventually is the best way to go. So yeah, I think it'll be a good solution. I don't foresee any problems with OCR approving it, because I think they normally, when you're going from 4 lanes, 2 lanes, I think that's desirable for their standpoint, I think. So I don't foresee that it's a problem. But I think it's a good solution.
Great, thanks, Bill. Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt all of staff's recommendations. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing no hands, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote in favor, unless anybody wishes to vote no or abstain. If so, please raise your hand. Okay, seeing no hands, the motion is carried. And again, thanks, Tom and everybody, for all of the hard work on this. I know there's been a lot of effort put into it.
Yep.
So.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, next we have Transportation Improvement Program, proposed projects and programs. Chris.
Hey, everybody. Chris Petikowski with City Engineering, and I am going to be presenting on our proposed draft Transportation Improvement Program, commonly known as the TIP. And I am going to share my screen here. All right. Is everybody seeing that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think many of you have seen this, a version of this presentation before. Each year we update our transportation improvement program. Basically what that is kind of a listing of all the proposed projects that we have proposed, and ultimately helps inform our budget request that we will submit to the mayor here in April. And then ultimately, what as it gets kind of worked through the process of the budget approval, it finally gets approved in our budget in November. So just kind of starting the process here. Let's see. Just trying to figure out how I'm moving the slide here. There we go. Okay, so last 2 weeks ago, Jose talked a lot about our scoring tool and how that's brought together. So I use that now to help inform our budget request and make sure that we are asking for kind of the right projects. So I won't go into great detail on the TIP scoring tool. I'll talk about some of our programs, We have a reconstruct street program, pavement management program, sidewalk program, bikeways program, and bridge repair. And then we have a few standalone major projects that I'll go through. We utilize federal funding a lot in this budget by way of the Surface Transportation Block Grant project and Transportation Alternatives Program, TAP. So I'll go into those projects and potential requests for future, and talk about a few other standalone projects, and finally show you kind of the state of our streets at this moment. So first off, the scoring tool, as Jose mentioned, we've developed kind of a scoring tool to help us prioritize our projects. It's based on 9 different layers. And I won't go into great detail because he just did that last 2 weeks ago. But as I mentioned, the scoring tool, you take all those layers together, you put them into a GIS database, and now we have a map throughout the city of each street segment and a score for each street segment. So it's been very helpful to help us prioritize looking at the projects that were in our TIP. And then, so this year compared to last year, we have to add 2031, right? So last year we did 25 to 30. This year is 26 to 31. So when I look to add projects, and if there are places where I think we have some gaps, we'll use that tool heavily to try to pick the projects. So I'll jump right into the programs. Reconstruct Streets program. So for next year, we have about 6 or 7 projects here proposed. This is kind of a tentative list. I'm still coordinating a lot with our storm and sanitary and water folks, because when you reconstruct a street, you're gonna reconstruct it entirely. We like to, we'll get rid of all the base, all the pavement, all the curb and gutter. We'll almost always do all the sanitary, sewer and storm sewer, and in most cases try to do the water main as well. So we have to coordinate with each other's agencies and try to not only pick the right projects, but sometimes one project may be very heavy on storm, and maybe 2 or 3 of them are really heavy on storm, and their utility can only handle a couple of those a year. So we have to kind of coordinate, and sometimes they have needs that are like urgent that we have to take care of too. So I'll be kind of coordinating with them over the next month until we submit our combined request to the mayor for budget. So right now we're looking at MacArthur, Larson, Sycamore, Burge, Evergreen, Cluster, Norman Way, Lakeview, Sherman, and Hawthorne. So those are all, I took a look at the scores. Some of these got on the list before we had the tool. Some of them are since the tool. They're all scoring quite high. A score in the 50s is actually really high. So I think, these are all good choices. They've been getting developed a little bit sometime, for instance, MacArthur, Larson, I've talked to the neighborhood once already. Evergreen, we've been kind of working through that neighborhood, and people are kind of used to the setup there. There's a couple of development projects there at the end. Hawthorne is related to the State Street Campus Garage project. So as soon as they're done with the apartments, we'll go in and reconstruct Hawthorne Court. And then the State and Mifflin Street Plaza is got to do with the Wisconsin History Center. So as that project is getting closer to finishing in 26, maybe even early 27, we'll kind of restore that area. And then the last one, Euclid Birch, it doesn't have the highest score, but it is in our, it does have a low pavement rating, and it is in our infiltration study area. We're doing, we have a grant with the DNR to test a lot of different infiltration methods and green infrastructure. So we want to continue that program. So those are the reconstruct streets. Those are the full, replace everything projects. They're very expensive. We can only get to sometimes 3 to 4 miles a year. The next program is a resurfacing program where we can really get a lot of bang for our buck on numbers of miles of streets. So typically we look to chip seal about 50 to 70 miles of street a year, which has been very successful for us. Crack sealing another 50 to 100 miles. We do a lot of patching, so if there's just one area that's got a lot of potholes and that sort of thing, we'll do maybe a 30-foot patch. We also, you guys will probably notice over the winter, there's some squares of pavement that are kind of very wavy. A lot of times that's a water main repair. They go to put some temporary pavement in, and then we come back and patch it later that summer. So we do all of those water main repairs in this program. And then we're looking at a few standalone resurface projects. Milwaukee Street near the Starkweather Platte project, Midvale Boulevard, and Lake Dayton also got to do with that State Street campus garage development. Virginia Terrace is a project that's new to the program this year. We've have a severely failing sanitary there. In the past 6 months, we've done 5 dig job repairs on Virginia Terrace, and we have 2 more scheduled. So that sanitary sewer is in dire state, and we want to replace that and then put a fresh coat of asphalt over the top. And we're also working with our partners at the county. They're resurfacing Rimrock Road. We'll have a cost share on that, and the town of Middleton is working on Meadow Road, and we'll help cost share with that as we kind of have joint responsibilities for some of those roads. So that's resurfacing program. Again, we try to really, with that chip sealing, we really try to stretch that out and cover a lot of streets. It can be kind of a pain for a couple days while that chip sealing happens, but it really prolongs the life of our pavement and stops projects from getting into the reconstruct program so quickly. As I mentioned, we have a couple of actually I didn't do this as much last year, so we had about 2 years of projects in 2030 and 2031 to start populating. And I used the tool to find all the highest scoring streets and start to look at those. So these are projects that I'm looking to add at the end of the tip in 2030 and 2031. There's quite a few here: Badger, Orchard, Lewis, Wyoda, Camas, Baker. Winnebago Atwood is an important one. Commercial Avenue, Parkside, Burr Oak, Ridgeway, and Felton. So those projects are all very high scoring. Most of them have a lot of storm needs. So these would be proposals to add kind of to the end of the tip in the reconstruct program. Okay, moving to our bikeways program. So this program allows us to help resurface paths that are I failed to mention at the beginning, we rate our streets half of the city each year, and similarly our paths as well. So we rate them 0 out of 10 using the Paiser method. And for a street, reconstruct, if a street gets down to a 3, it's in terrible condition and it needs to get put on our list. Streets that are like a 6 or 7, 6 could maybe be chip sealed, or sometimes resurfaced depending on the traffic. But in the case of bike paths, we've been trying to resurface all paths that are either 5 or less, and that's been pretty successful. We've been pretty good at keeping up with that. So this program helps with that resurfacing. It also helps with small path connections when we do get caught up and have a little money left over. So this year, just as a reminder, we have our North Shore Drive path getting built. A Bartolon path is going out for bid soon. We have a new path being built in the Pheasant Branch Creek over on the far west side, and a new path on the far east side on Tancho Drive. So those are getting built this year with that program. In 2026, we're proposing to resurface the Marlboro Park paths. There's a small wall repair on the Cap City path at Bennett Drive that we'd like to get at. There's some Cap City path widening at Acewood Conservancy. There's 2 connections there that are basically little sidewalk connections that are used as the Cap City path. We want to widen those out into regular, resurface them as a regular path, bike path. And then we'll inspect again the half of the city this summer and try to add any new resurfacings that we need to add in there. Sidewalk program is kind of a very successful program for us. We go around the city in 10 years and do replacements of sidewalk. So we do 2 districts a year typically. And right this summer, we have District 10 and 20 scheduled. In 2026, next year, then will be Districts 2 and 6 will be scheduled. So we'll be starting to work on those. In addition to the ordered sidewalks in those 2 districts, we also have citywide requests. So sometimes somebody will call in, maybe there's a trip hazard or some drainage problems with some sidewalk. We'll actually do a citywide repair contract that fixes some of those issues. And then in the past few years, we've been really busy doing Metro bus pads for the redesign project. And as the routes change and they need pads in different places, we would install those with this program. So we've been doing a lot of those in the past year and a half, and we'll be doing them this year. Hopefully we'll get closer to being finished, but I'm certain there'll be more in 2026 to do as well. And then we have our bridge repair program. So this is really small repairs to bridges. There's not a ton of funds in this program, but it does help with keeping up our bridges in good standing. In 2025, we're working a little bit on Knutson Bridge, painting those beams. We have some concrete spall repairs on the bridge over Park Street, a pedestrian bridge over Park Street, and a pedestrian bridge over Stoughton Road. And then we have some Campus Drive over Highland concrete repairs to do. So those will be happening this summer. Next year, we're hoping we can get to some epoxy coating of the bridge decks that helps kind of put a seal coat layer on the top that stops the water from penetrating into the bridges and lets them last longer. So proposing some work there in 2026 on epoxy coating, and these kind of come up as the year goes along. So there might be a couple other things that we throw into the 2026 contract as we get through 2025 and may become aware of things. Okay, now I'm jumping back in out of the programs and into just like standalone projects that are standalone items in our budget. These are usually means they usually have federal funding in them. John Nolan Drive is our biggie. So we're going to be reconstructing starting this fall. Tom actually mentioned before from Broome Street down to Lakeside. It includes the 3 bridges over the causeway and adding 3 new ped bike bridges as part of that too, instead of having them kind of cantilevered off the street bridges. Excited to get that project started and completed. Those bridges are in poor condition. We do have later in the tip 2028 phase 2 and 2029 phase 3 planned as Tom mentioned. So a lot of work in that corridor. Those are big expensive projects, and we're lucky to have the federal funding to go along with those. I should mention too, on these 28 and 29 ones, the commission will probably come, you guys have already approved the geometry for the first phase, but we'll be coming to you folks with the preliminary designs for these later phases, hopefully later this year. Mineral Point Road is another federally funded project. And I think I have this in 27. I'm just thinking in my head, it might be 26. I might have that one.
It's 26 and 27.
Okay, thank you, Andy. I knew you were on here. Yeah, so this is a reconstruct project, not a reconstruct, pavement replacement project from the Beltline to High Point Road. We're doing some safety improvements at the corner there. The bike lane was already built with the BRT project, but the pavement still needs to be done. And there's a very large storm sewer that's getting put under the road and very deep. So that'll be a very complicated project coming up starting in 2026. Also, in the same area, we have the West Town Path Phase 2. That is this path here in 2028. We are building what we call Phase 2A this summer there's basically a missing link right now from Gammon Road to High Point Road. And this summer we're building from High Point over to Zor Shrine. And then in 2028, we have funding to continue that path through to Gammon and complete that West Town Path that we've been working on for years and years. So that'll be the last phase. High Point Road is a new project to the federally funding. It was added last year. We are going to be rebuilt or extending the portion of High Point Road that is missing right now. There's a missing stretch between Midtown and Raymond, and we'll be constructing that starting in 2026. May linger into 2027 also, but at the completion of that project, then High Point will be continuous throughout its length with no gaps anymore, which would be nice. Pleasant View Road is a future STBG application. So this one is not funded yet. This summer, I think in June, we'll be applying for the next round of STBG projects, which will be out in 2030 and 2031. So we are proposing to apply for this phase of Pleasant View Road. We just completed the piece to the north. Andy just finished that project, or it's getting finished, mostly finished. from Old Sauk up to Highway 14, I think it is, up in Middleton, joint project with Middleton. So the second phase, we've already kind of approved the preliminary design and the environmental doc, but we still need to do the final plans and apply for the federal funds for the construction of this segment here from Old Sauk down to Mineral Point. So proposing that in 2030. Here's another new one. This is a totally new request that we're considering applying for in this summer. So we're up in the northeast area of the city here. There's Hepker Road. Here's 51. This red road is I-39. And the current I-39 environmental document recommends an interchange at the Hepker Road area. So along with that, we would consider to propose an STBG project to kind of upgrade the Hepker Road from the interchange out to kind of the city limits, and then Portage Road from just a little bit north of the intersection down to kind of where the new UW hospital is here, almost to Hansen Road. So that is a project we would think, upgrading Portage Road to curb and gutter, sidewalk, a path, same with Hepker, and kind of modernize those roads, improve them. And our thought was to align that with the interchange project that could be in the 2030s is kind of the best estimate we have right now. So again, this would be a proposed application this summer. And then the third one I wanted to show is one we've applied for before, but there wasn't funding to include it in the program just yet. It would be this purple part of the Midtown and Raymond realignment that's shown in the neighborhood plan. As I mentioned, we're building the High Point portion of it starting next year, but this application then would improve Midtown and include this new alignment curve into Raymond Road, and this piece of Raymond here then would be eliminated or go away. So that is another application that we are thinking we would like to apply for. There's also some potential. Well, these are not city projects, these next two slides, but there could be city cost share components to them. So I wanted to point those out. There's two studies going on 51. There's a north study, the north side of the city, and then the south study. Basically, the split point is like Highway 30. The one that's coming along a little sooner is the north study here, and right now the current plan shows a ped bike path on the east side of the road and two new ped bike bridges, one over East Wash, one over 51 just south of 30 here. So we don't know quite yet what those cost share components the WSDOT would ask us to participate with, but we do think there will be some, and as soon as we know that, we can kind of try to upgrade our budget request or update our budget requests. These I want to say the north study is in the 2028 kind of range for construction. And then the south study is, I don't think, not in this tip yet, as I understand it. The next slide is I-39. So WISTAT is also studying I-39 and improvements along there. And we also have some potential cost shares with those projects. I already mentioned the Hepker Road interchange that we're starting to plan for. They do that is up here in the far northeast. The Milwaukee Street interchange is also shown as included, but that's not even until the 2040s at this point, their current thinking. So, that won't show up in this tip from 26 to 31, but stuff we have to kind of think about for the future. There are a number of ped bike bridges and underpasses proposed in that plan, and the AmFam area, East Washington area, Lean Road area, Milwaukee Street, and then Cap City Path area. One thing we have asked for them to consider is on Milwaukee Street to have some temporary improvements done, because right now that Milwaukee Street bridge over I-39 has no sidewalk, and we'd like to put something temporary in until they do get to that area for construction. I think that would be, the full reconstruct of that area wouldn't be probably till the 2040s, but we don't want to wait that long for the sidewalk issue. So we have asked for some kind of temporary improvement. Hopefully that would be like in the Hepker Road time frame, like late 20s, early 30s, hopefully. All right, so now I move over to our TAP program. The TAP program is federally funded, mostly bike path kind of projects. And the next one we have in the tip is Cap City Path Phase 5 and 6 that it extends it from Wagon Trail, crosses the railroad, and then also crosses underneath I-39. Hoping to put that out for bids next summer, 2026. That one, so these are approved and funded, and we're working on the plans at this time. The next TAP project we have scheduled is in 2027, this East Rusk Path, getting you from Rusk over to Rimrock Road. We have a project getting bid this summer, a TAP project out along called Badger Rusk Path, we're building a path here and up Rusk Avenue. We would like to extend that all the way to Rimrock Road. And as part of the Rimrock Road resurfacing project, there's going to be a new path on the west side of that road. So it'll be a lot of nice connections here, and then get you over to the Cap City Path on John Nolan. So that's East Rusk. We also have Moreland Path scheduled in 2027 as well, extending from Raywood over to Wayland. Also funded, and just starting to work on getting the survey done for those projects. We also have Woodward Path, which extends from the little past Forester Drive down to Sheridan Drive. So this will be a new path along Woodward Drive in 2028. And then we have a few proposed future applications that we're considering. Now the TAP projects, I think they should have a solicitation, I think, this fall. And some of the projects that we're looking to apply for, this is the West Beltline Highway Path, kind of along the Arboretum area from Seminole Highway over to Landmark Trail. So they have a new path along that stretch. There's some missing sidewalk gaps and along this area, and what we'll do is kind of tighten up the roadway and use some of that real estate space to build a path that both peds and bikes can use along that whole stretch. So that is a future application. This one actually did get approved temporarily, very shortly, and then they realized we didn't have enough money to fund that one, so it's back in the waiting room, so to speak. But I think it'll be a very good candidate to get approved as soon as the next solicitation goes out. There's a couple other paths that along the kind of near the Garber path and the Autumn Ridge path that would make some connections there that I think could be future TAP applications for. So, we built the Garber path up to Milwaukee Street. So developers in charge of extending that a little bit to the north. And then we'd like to make that final connection up to the current path that exists up here along Highway 30. So that might be one potential future application. As I mentioned, the current 51 project includes a bridge over Stoughton Road. We'd like to extend that then to connect that with the new Autumn Ridge path and bridge connection that we have right here at Ziegler Road. So those are also potential future application requests. All right, now we are into just city projects. Midvale Boulevard is a big project for us. We'd like to resurface it. It's kind of a tweener as far as a resurface and a reconstruct. There's some extremely large storm sewer needs here, and the stormwater utility is not likely to be able to afford them right away after all the significant investments we've been putting in. So what we're hoping to do is do a resurface with this project and maybe do some restriping to try to maybe some safety improvements, but just to get us by for another 10 to 15 years until we can complete the reconstruction. So that one, we actually proposed it for this year, but we've, at the request of the neighborhood, with a lot of other ongoing projects, pushed that off to 2026. Excuse me. And then we have Regent Street, very large project. This would be a reconstruct from Randall Avenue to Park Street. There's a failing storm sewer box culvert underneath the Regent Street, and we need to get in there and replace that. So proposing to reconstruct that street, reconstruct the storm sewer box culvert, and then make some possible changes to like the sidewalk and maybe possibly add like facility if we can do some changes to the cross section there. So Midvale and Regent Street are both city projects. We're just we don't have federal funds for those. And then we have our Troy Drive Railroad Bridge that we continue to try to work with the railroad to fund. Hopeful that we can actually get the design started this year now, and slight possibility of even starting construction this year, but most likely in 2026. That would rebuild the railroad bridge over Troy Drive, allowing for space for sidewalk on both sides of the street and bike lanes in the street. All right, other city projects going on that are, we're coordinating with our partner agencies, North-South BRT and Safe Streets, of course. With those are ongoing projects that we're coordinating as well. They're not actually in the city engineering's budget, but part of our overall tip. All right, last couple slides here. Just give you an update on where we are with our street conditions. As I mentioned before, we rate our streets, half the streets each year. So every 2 years, we get a full new data set. And we have goals to try to keep our streets in good conditions. And right now, we're doing very well on local streets. We would like 30% or less miles at or below condition 5, and we are down to 17 still. So we're doing pretty well there. Our collector streets, our goal is to have 25% or less state condition 5, still doing well there. You can see too, we've also kind of set newer goals. We really want to get everything that's a 3. 3 is an awful street that we really need to get into the program, and by trying to get those into the tip so that there's no 3 streets. But of course, every year there's a new 3 street that pops up even after all the ones we do. So kind of an ongoing thing, but a goal to try to get at all of those. Arterial streets, our goal was to keep 20% at or below condition 5. We did tip over that goal in the past year with the ratings, so we'll have to take a look at that and make sure we can between our pavement management program and some of those treatments to try to get those pavement ratings up again. Arterial streets are used by most of the city, and more a desire to keep those in a good condition. They affect a lot of people, as well as Metro and out of the city. Oh, I missed the paths one. Shoot. Just stop sharing for a second. I think it's share. Seeing that?
Yes.
Okay. State of our path. So we are doing pretty well. Trying to get at all those 5s and get them resurfaced. I believe the bulk of this is that Marlboro Park area and some of the John Nolan Drive path that we're having our tip. So trying to get this 1% back down to 0%. All right, that was my last slide. So, just have our contact information here, our city engineer, myself and Andy are, kind of the primary sources for getting stuff scheduled and working on these projects. Every project does have a website. Not necessarily every project in the tip, but every project that we're working on. So some of the 28 projects might not have a website yet, but all the 26 ones will shortly. And that's a great place to get updates. And you can sign up for project email updates as well. So that's, I guess, the end of my presentation, and happy to entertain any questions.
Thanks, Chris. Comments or questions for Chris? Bill.
Thanks, Ann. Chris, the tip, does that have WISDOT projects on it? That specifically, I'm looking into overpass projects.
Yes, so
over the Beltline.
So it kind of depends what in our program. I'll include ones that I think we have a cost share component on.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll sometimes just show on the map the WISDOT projects that we're coordinating with them on, but if we don't have a cost component on. So what happens is I'll send the tip to the MPO of all our projects, right? And then they'll combine them with the WISDOT projects, and together they'll put the whole region tip together.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, WisDOT is spending a lot of money on the I-39 and 51 on the east side. So I just wondered if they backed off of doing anything on the overpasses on the South Beltline.
South Beltline.
For instance, I know we were interested in a project, a couple of overpass projects.
Yes.
To relieve the.
Those are not programmed yet.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right. So they're at least 6 years out then.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. Other comments or questions for Chris? Okay, I'm seeing no hands. Chris, do you need a motion for the Transportation Commission to accept your report? Are you okay just with review and feedback?
I think review and feedback's just fine. Yeah.
Okay. Any last questions or comments? I don't see anybody in the queue, so I'm assuming, Aiden, we didn't have anybody registered to speak.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other comment?
I would just say real quick,
Sure.
If people see this and over time that spurs kind of some of their thoughts and want to submit project ideas to Andy or I, please do so. Ultimately, as I mentioned, we'll kind of keep tweaking this until we submit our budget in April 16th, I think it is. So please, if you don't have comments now, you can certainly send us some as they come up.
Hey, thanks, Chris. A lot in the works, as there always is. So we appreciate it. All right, thanks so much. Okay, we move on to item 6. Members of the Transportation Commission who are members of other boards, committees, and commissions. Does anybody have any updates to report this evening? Chris.
Thanks. I guess I could have brought this up as future agenda items or reports from other commissions, but flagging that Plan Commission occasionally gets conditional uses, development projects that are seeking conditional use that are in the transit-oriented development overlay. And so when that happens, the Plan Commission is sort of evaluating whether the project meets the TOD requirements. And at a meeting earlier this week, some folks showed up to make the case that a certain project wasn't meeting the requirements of TOD. The Plan Commission eventually decided it was. But anyway, that might be something down the road that this commission might want to see, sort of what projects have come through the pipeline and what the outcome was when it comes to TOD.
Is there some sort of summary that's, maybe we could talk offline about that, Chris.
Sure.
In terms of, I'm just making a note on future agenda items, because that might be interesting for us to see. Why don't we talk offline about that in terms of how we might be able to do that? Does that sound good? Okay. Anybody else have anything to report? Okay. Seeing no hands. General announcements. As I reminded you last time, and you've seen some emails, Renee is planning to retire, is retiring March 20th. And just want to make sure you notice in your email that Yang sent out an invitation to retirement parties for Renee on March 20th. So in case anybody is able to join us to help celebrate Renee. Yang, did you have any comment about that?
No, thank you, Ann. And hopeful to see people there.
Okay, great. And we're working on a congratulatory resolution, which we'll have at the next meeting for Renee. And then Tom Lynch is His retirement is coming up in April, so we'll be doing that as well. And that was all I had for announcements. In terms of future agenda items, for the next meeting, we have possible amendment to the to traffic engineering's budget, potentially some updates to Chapter 11 ordinance and Chapter 12, potentially paid parking for Wilson Street lot, the Department of Transportation Annual Operations Report. Tom's been working on that. And the resolution that we talked about for Renee, and Tom Moore may bring, if there's any updates for us from the West Washington and Southwest Path that we discussed tonight, he'd be bringing that back as needed as well. And, you know, we certainly always have items on the agenda going forward. Yang, go ahead.
Thank you, and just that you know that staff are finishing up our study for the traffic signal priority list. So we'll be bringing it over there as well next meeting.
Okay. Great. I'll add that on to our agenda list. Anybody have any other suggestions for future agenda items? We also have a good list from TC members that we talk about at our agenda meetings, and we'll try and work those in as we can. Okay, then we need a motion to adjourn. Robbie?
Move adjournment.
Is there a second? Alder Martinez Rutherford.
I will second it.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to assume a unanimous consent vote, and thanks everybody for tonight, and we'll see you next time.